On a freezing early morning in Toronto, when even taxis seemed to have stopped running and the silence of the snowy streets was broken only by the distant sound of sirens, a glass building in the financial district was still lit up. On the top floor, surrounded by large windows and monitors flashing red, Dylan Hartman, CEO of Hartman Tech Solutions, could not sleep. It was the third consecutive sleepless night. 3 weeks of non-stop failures on a project valued at over $300 million. The software, the company's great promise, was on the verge of collapse. And along with it, investor confidence, the prestige of the brand, and the very legacy Dylan had worked so hard to build. For the 20th time, he watched the lines of code shuffle across the screen. The best engineers had tried. International consultants had been called in. Nothing. The bug remained like a silent shadow, escaping all analysis. Each click, each attempt at a solution seemed like another step towards the abyss. Outside the glass-enclosed office, the world was asleep. But inside, the tension was almost palpable. Dylan stood, ran his hands through his already disheveled brown hair, and paced the room with weary steps. The city below looked like a frozen board game. He knew, if he didn't fix this soon, the council would make him pay dearly. Suddenly, an unexpected sound cut through the silence. The soft tapping of fingers. Dylan frowned. It was too late for any staff to be around. He left the room and walked down the narrow hallway, lit by low lights. The sound was coming from one of the monitoring rooms. He approached it silently. Peeking through the half-open door, he saw something that made no sense at all. A young woman in a navy blue uniform, her hair tied back in a messy bun, was sitting in front of one of the company's computers. Her fingers flew over the keys with an almost hypnotic dexterity. On the screen, lines of code unfolded like a precise dance, as if each character had a millimeter-long purpose. For a moment, Dylan just stared, mesmerized, confused, and most of all, intrigued. "What are you doing here?" His voice was firm but restrained. The young woman turned quickly, her eyes wide. She stood up immediately. "Excuse me, sir. I just saw that the screen was open and I thought I'd give it a try." It was Noah Rivers, a cleaning lady, newly hired if he remembered correctly. Early 20s, low-pitched, always invisible in the corners of the night. "Try what?" he asked, stepping closer. Noah looked down as if she might disappear, but hesitantly she pointed at the screen. "The code. I saw a pattern in the lines, some broken logic in the recursion of the integration script. I just fixed it." Dylan narrowed his eyes in disbelief. He sat down. He read the changes. He reread them. He opened the console. He ran the tests. 5 minutes later, what weeks of experts had failed to do was fixed. The system was working again. The bug was gone. Dylan's heart raced, not just because the problem had been solved, but because of the question that was now gnawing at his mind. Who was this woman? And why did no one, absolutely no one, know what she was capable of? That night, under the white lights of a nearly empty office, something began that would change not only the fate of a company, but the lives of two completely different people. A CEO on the brink of collapse, and an invisible young woman who, with a simple gesture, had just saved everything. Dylan couldn't leave that room. No matter how stable the system was, no matter how perfectly the code was now flowing on the screen, his attention was completely focused on the figure in front of him. Noah was still standing there, nervous, with her hands clasped in front of her blue apron, trying to figure out if she was going to be fired or reprimanded. But Dylan didn't say anything. She just watched, trying to understand how someone so far off the radar, so far from the company's labs, had done what Hartman Tech's greatest engineers couldn't. "Where did you learn that?" he asked finally, with a calm but curious tone. "I just like to program, sir." Her voice was almost a whisper. "I study in my spare time." He could tell she didn't want to draw attention to herself, or justify herself too much. She wanted to disappear, to go back to being invisible, as she had probably always been. "Do you know what you just did?" he continued. She nodded shyly. "I saw the code repeating conflicting commands. It was just a logic flaw, hidden behind the security masks. I thought maybe I could fix it." "You didn't just see. You cracked one of the most complex algorithms my team has ever developed, and you did it, while mopping the floor with a bucket and rag by your side." She hung her head in shame. "I didn't mean to hack anything, I swear. I saw the screen lit up and was tempted to try. I'm sorry." Dylan stepped back and crossed his arms. He knew that look. The look of someone who's been silenced so many times that they've learned to expect nothing. "Do you have any idea how many nights my team spent trying to figure this out?" he said, and then let out a low, almost ironic laugh mixed with a sigh. I was ready to declare the project a failure myself. Noah just nodded, still unsure whether to run or stay put. Dylan then walked over, pulled out the chair next to her, and pointed at the monitor. "Show me exactly what you did." She hesitated for a second, but then gently sat down. She typed quickly, explaining every line changed, every loop fixed, every function rearranged. She didn't use technical jargon arrogantly, nor did she flaunt her intelligence. She just showed him what she had done, like someone who intuitively understood how things worked, as if the code was speaking to her. Dylan was silent for a long time, just listening. When she was done, he closed the laptop slowly. "You have a gift, Noah." She stood up quickly. "I'll be right there. I'm really sorry, sir. I shouldn't have moved." But Dylan interrupted her with a gesture. "Not only could you should." That morning, Dylan was alone again after Noah had silently left. But his thoughts were no longer on the project, nor on the shareholders. They were on her, on what he had seen, on what he had felt. There was something rare about that young woman, an extraordinary mind hidden beneath her simple uniform, walking through the halls as if she were carrying a huge secret that no one bothered to ask about. He didn't know yet what he would do. But one thing was certain. That wouldn't be the last time he would cross paths with Noah Rivers. Because some people cross our paths as a coincidence, others as an answer. And that night, Dylan was beginning to understand that Noah was both. The next morning, Dylan arrived at the company before sunrise. The city was still waking up in the bitter January cold, but his mind was already buzzing. The image of Noah sitting in front of the computer, typing with that almost supernatural ease, wouldn't leave his mind. Something about that scene had moved him on a level he couldn't explain, and he needed to know more. It wasn't distrust, it was fascination, curiosity. Who was that woman who, without access to any advanced system, without a developer badge, had solved a problem that cost millions? Using the company's internal security, Dylan used her credentials to access the HR system. He typed in her name, Noah Rivers. The profile came up with little information, address, temporary contract number, and a job title listed as night cleaning assistant, hired by a third-party company. No mention of her education, technical skills, or previous technology experience. This only made him even more intrigued. That same day, he discreetly contacted an acquaintance from the University of Toronto. He asked for a quick, informal search. He wanted to know if that young woman had been there. Hours later, the answer arrived. And what he discovered took the breath from his lungs. Noah Rivers had been one of the most promising students in the computer science program. She had been admitted with a full scholarship, was among the top 10% of students, and had won a university competition for cybersecurity. Her professors described her as brilliant, analytical, and with above-average logical reasoning. But suddenly, in her second year, she dropped out of the program without explanation. Dylan scanned every detail of the academic record, trying to understand the reason for such an abrupt withdrawal. There were no disciplinary notes, no failures, no problems recorded, just a dry line. Voluntary withdrawal for personal reasons. That didn't seem fair. Even more curious, Dylan asked a trusted investigator to gather public information. Within 24 hours, the puzzle began to come together. Noah's father had owned a small technology company that went bankrupt during the financial crisis of the previous year. The family had lost almost everything. Shortly afterward, Noah's mother was diagnosed with a degenerative disease, and unable to afford the costs, the young woman dropped out of school to care for her. She began to work odd jobs, casual jobs. Finally, she took a night shift at a contract cleaning company to pay the bills and be with her mother during the day. Dylan closed the file and remained silent for a long time. What impressed him most was not only Noah's talent, but the fact that she never used it to promote herself, never asked for recognition, never tried to stand out. She simply continued with dignity, living in the shadow of anonymity. That night, as he walked through the company hallways, Dylan saw her again. She was cleaning one of the meeting rooms in silence, with her headphones connected to an old MP3 player. When she noticed his presence, she quickly removed the headphones and straightened her posture, and greeted him. "Good evening, Mr. Hartman." And he replied, "Good evening, Miss Noah." She waited for some comment, a scolding perhaps. But he just smiled faintly, nodded, and kept walking. Deep down, Dylan knew. Something inside him had changed. Because some discoveries aren't just information, they're mirrors. And Noah Rivers had just become the mirror Dylan didn't know he needed, showing that even behind the scenes, there are minds that shine brighter than any spotlight could ever illuminate. In the days that followed, Dylan could barely contain his anxiety. On the outside, he remained the firm, focused CEO, attending meetings, giving interviews to investors, and monitoring the data from the project that, now stabilized, was beginning to bear fruit. But on the inside, something different was driving him, a silent, almost childish impulse to test the improbable, to discreetly provoke Noah Rivers' hidden genius. Without telling anyone, he began to purposely insert errors into secondary sections of code that he knew would pass through the maintenance computers. Not obvious errors. Small logical flaws, subtle inconsistencies that only someone with an extremely technical and sensitive eye would be able to notice. Nothing that would compromise the system, but enough that, if noticed, someone would leave a trail of corrections. And that's exactly what happened. The morning after his first attempt, he went back to the test server, and there it was, the bug fixed. And next to it, a little post-it note stuck to his monitor. Variable X was not being reinitialized, may cause conflict in future runs. Fixed. No signature, no fanfare, no attempt to attract attention. Dylan read and reread the note, smiling to himself. This wasn't a guess. It was precision, intelligence, silence, the mark of someone who didn't want applause, just to do what was right. Over the next few weeks, he kept testing. He created little puzzles hidden between lines of code. And each time he found clear, simple answers, and another handwritten note in delicate, almost meticulous handwriting. Sometimes it used technical words. Other times, she would simply leave a suggestion. You might want to consider doing inverse recursion in this loop. Or, is there a more streamlined way to do this function? With each new correction, Dylan felt a quiet admiration grow. It wasn't just her talent, it was her poise, her humility, her complete lack of ego. Noah wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone. She just saw something that could be improved, and improved it. One particularly cold night, he stayed in the office after hours. Most of the employees had already left. He sat in his leather chair, a cup of cold coffee in his hand, staring at the monitor, waiting. And then he heard that sound again, the rapid, almost rhythmic typing coming from another room. He walked over. He found Noah standing in front of one of the test computers, frowning as she studied a piece of code with almost artistic attention. When she saw it, she jumped. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I saw an error in one of the files and I just wanted to help." Dylan gave her a slight smile. "You've helped this company more than anyone could ever imagine." She looked down, disconcerted, but he didn't insist. He just watched as she packed up her things, leaving another note on the corner of the table. That night, alone, Dylan read the note in silence, and he realized something was happening, something he hadn't planned on. It wasn't just Noah's mind that fascinated him. It was the way she saw the world, how she refused to accept that her condition defined her worth, how she acted with kindness, even in an environment that never truly saw her. For every mistake he made, she gave him a solution. But unbeknownst to him, she was also fixing something inside him, something he didn't even know needed fixing. And so, behind the scenes of the company, hidden among anonymous keys and notes, a connection was born. Discreet, unlikely, and deeply human, between two worlds that should never have crossed. But that, inexplicably, were already beginning to walk side by side. Dylan knew he could no longer pretend that nothing was happening. Noah's discreet presence had infiltrated the company's corridors and especially his thoughts. But he also knew he had to proceed with caution. He couldn't just pull her out of her cleaning job and into a computer overnight, especially without raising suspicions or creating a stir within the company. The corporate environment, while sophisticated, was driven by egos, rules, and protocols. And any abrupt move could provoke resistance, or worse, harm her. So he decided to do something different. He called Noah into his office on a quiet night, when most people had already left. She entered shyly, looking around as if she wasn't sure if she should even be there. Dylan greeted her with a slight smile and pointed to the chair in front of the desk. "Noah, have you ever thought about working with technology in a more direct way?" Her eyes widened in surprise. I've thought about it, yes, before. But life hasn't been very kind to me. What if I told you we have a temporary position as a technical assistant? Would you accept it? A short-term contract, flexible hours. You could keep your routine but take part in some projects behind the scenes. Nothing public yet, just between us. Noah was silent for a moment. It was clear that something inside her was struggling between the desire to accept and the fear of leaving the safe zone she had built with so much sacrifice. "I really appreciate it," she said, her eyes brimming with tears. "But I don't know if this is the right time. I still take care of my mother, and my routine is completely adjusted because of her. I can't risk leaving her alone." Dylan nodded understandingly. He didn't insist. He simply said that the offer was still open, whenever she wanted. But a few days later, he acted silently. Using one of his personal connections, he arranged for a specialized medical evaluation for Noah's mother at a private clinic in the city. He paid for everything anonymously, using a fictitious name. He made sure that no clues would link him to the action. Noah never knew where the benefit came from. She just got a call from the clinic saying that her mother had been accepted into the free home care program. It was like a miracle, and she thanked them in prayer, thinking that luck had finally smiled on them. With her mother's health stabilized, Noah began to show up more frequently at different times. She cleaned the hallways more calmly, and from time to time stopped in front of the development team's monitors. She fixed small bugs she found and left notes, always with humility. Nothing changed in her uniform, but something inside her was already changing. Dylan, on the other hand, continued to watch. From a distance, without forcing anything, just watching his silent presence become vital to the projects. His notes began to circulate among developers, even without knowing who was the mastermind behind them. They called them the messages from the Angel of Dawn. Some thought it was one of the engineers messing around. Others thought it was Dylan, testing the team. But he didn't say a word. He guarded Noah as if he were guarding a secret too precious to reveal before it was time. Because deep down, he knew. It wasn't just the company that was changing because of her. He was too. And when someone changes you silently, without asking for anything in return, it's because they're not just touching your mind, they're touching your soul. And it was in that invisible space between the codes and the silently clean hallways that Dylan's admiration for Noah began to grow into something even deeper. The weeks passed with an almost rehearsed naturalness, as if everything was falling into place, even if no one noticed. Noah, now more present behind the scenes at the company, was beginning to be part of the behind-the-scenes activities that really mattered. There was no engineering badge, no desk with a name on it. His work continued silently, almost invisible, but his touch was felt in every progress of the new systems, in every optimized line of code, in every project that came out of the drawing board with a lightness that previously seemed impossible. Dylan had quietly arranged for her to be an informal technical consultant. It was a verbal agreement, without fanfare. Payments were made as performance bonuses, using internal funds, nothing that would raise eyebrows among the board, but enough to give her some recognition, however limited, for her contributions. More than that, it was a way of protecting her. Dylan knew how cruel the corporate environment could be to those who didn't follow the traditional path. In the early days, engineers were unsure of who was behind the suggestions that appeared in internal reports. Team leaders talked among themselves about the ghost collaborator who seemed to see solutions where no one else did. A security algorithm advanced 3 months in just 2 weeks after she directly intervened. An AI module gained unprecedented accuracy after she suggested a small change to a forgotten line. Little by little, Noah began to be noticed, not with fanfare, but with respect. A murmur of admiration began to circulate through the halls. Did you see who fixed that bug? Someone changed the authentication system, and it was perfect. I wonder who is behind these optimizations. She never spoke out. She continued to follow some cleaning routines, by choice. She said that it gave her peace, that she didn't want to give it all up yet, maybe out of fear, maybe out of attachment to silence, to normality. But there was something in her eyes now, a different spark, as if she knew that, for the first time in a long time, she was being seen, and valued not for her appearance, nor for a printed resume, but for what she really was, a brilliant, rare, deeply human mind. Dylan, on the other hand, found himself increasingly transformed. It was as if, by walking alongside her, even from a distance, he learned to see the world from a different perspective. Meetings no longer bored him as they once had, because now he had something to protect. The decisions he made were made with more empathy, with more care, with more purpose. His leadership was changing, shaped by Noah's presence, even without her knowing it. One freezing afternoon, as Dylan was reviewing the quarter's earnings reports, he realized something extraordinary. The company, which had been bleeding for months, was finally growing again. The numbers were improving, shareholders were regaining confidence, and stalled projects were moving forward. And at the center of it all, though she wasn't in the charts or PowerPoint presentations, was her, Noah Rivers. That same night, Dylan saw her in the main lobby cleaning the elevator area. She was wearing headphones, dancing lightly without realizing she was being watched. And it was in that moment, watching that woman dance alone, with freedom and lightness, that he understood. Noah was not just the silent soul behind the company's recovery. She was the heart. And when someone is able to rebuild everything without asking for anything in return, you start to wonder not what they came to do in your life, but what you need to do to never let them go. Time, which had previously seemed to drag along in the cold corridors of Hartman Tech, now ran with the urgency of something alive. The project that had been on the verge of failure had become the greatest success in the company's history. Charts were soaring.
Investidores sorridentes voltavam a aparecer. Os números cresciam, os contratos se multiplicavam. Mas o que ninguém sabia, ainda, era quem estava por trás dessa virada impressionante. A pressão sobre Dylan aumentava. Os conselheiros exigiam nomes, queriam saber quem havia liderado as mudanças no núcleo dos algoritmos, quem reestruturou as funções internas do sistema, quem trouxe o código de volta à vida com tamanha maestria.
Credit was being given to middle managers, as the corporate script dictated. But Dylan knew this was a silent injustice, a painful omission. He looked at Noah and saw much more than a brilliant programmer. He saw someone who had given everything she had, her intelligence, her intuition, her sensitivity, without ever seeking recognition. But that had to change. He knew the time had come. It was at an executive meeting, in front of directors, shareholders, and senior managers, that Dylan made the decision. While the others discussed internal awards, bonus proposals, and promotions, he stood up and cleared his throat. "Before we continue," he said, his voice firm, "there is something I need to clarify." All eyes turned to him.
Everyone here knows that the last 3 months have been decisive for the recovery of our company, and many members of our team have been rightly praised. But the person truly responsible for this transformation has not yet been recognized. In fact, almost no one knows who it is. An uncomfortable silence has settled in.
The code was fixed by someone who wasn't even part of our tech team. Someone who came to this company as a janitor, who, in the quiet hours of the night, corrected our mistakes, showed us the way, and made the impossible a reality. Dylan motioned to the door, and it opened. Noah walked in slowly, her eyes wide, surprised to be there. She was wearing simple clothes, her hair tied up and her gaze attentive. She walked with timid steps to the center of the room. No one understood what was happening. Dylan turned to everyone. "This is Noah Rivers, and she was the one who saved the biggest project in our history." A deep silence took over the room. For a second, no one knew how to react. Then one of the directors stood up, followed by another. And then the unthinkable happened. The room, previously so cold and calculating, exploded in applause. Noah didn't know what to do. She tried to back away, tried to leave, but Dylan gently held her hand, keeping her there. "You deserve to be in this place," he said softly, "and the world needs to know that." At that moment, without meaning to, Noah became a symbol, not only of hidden genius, but of silent overcoming, of the courage that exists in continuing even when the world closes its doors. Her teary eyes said more than words, and her presence there, before the elite of one of the largest companies in the country, was proof that true talent does not remain silent forever. In that room, faced with so many who only saw resumes and degrees, Dylan chose to see beyond. And with that gesture, he gave Noah not only the professional recognition she deserved, but the right to be seen, heard, respected. For the first time, not as a shadow in the hallways, but as the light that guided everyone. Noah was radiant, still wearing the understated dress she had chosen for the city's annual Innovation Gala. The event brought together the biggest names in technology, investors, journalists, and business leaders, a stage reserved for those who shape the future. But tonight, the focus was not just on the spotlight, but on the young woman who just a few months ago had been invisible to everyone. When the announcement of her name as the winner of the Innovation Award echoed throughout the room, a mixture of surprise and admiration took hold of the audience. Noah walked onto the stage with firm steps, her face lit up with a sincere smile, and her eyes shining with emotion. She took a deep breath, looked at the packed audience, and began her speech. "I never imagined I would be here," she said, her voice soft but full of emotion. "When I started working at this company, I was just a cleaner. Many people may have underestimated my worth or simply didn't see me. But I believe that talent and dedication have no set place. They live where courage exists. I dedicate this award to my mother, who taught me to fight even when everything seemed lost." The audience listened in reverent silence. Noah's words touched something deep within everyone there. Her story of overcoming, humility, and strength was the true prize of that night. When she finished, warm applause echoed throughout the hall. It was then that Dylan, impeccably dressed in his dark suit, came up on stage beside her. He looked her in the eye, held her hand firmly, and in front of everyone did something unexpected. "Noah Rivers," he began, his voice firm and emotional. "You didn't just save a project. You saved a company, a team, an entire family that depends on it. And you saved me, because you showed me that genius can be found where we least expect it, and that true value lies in being authentic, even when no one is looking." The room fell silent, all eyes fixed on that moment. Dylan slowly knelt before Noah, pulled a small black velvet box from his pocket and opened it, revealing a delicate ring. "Noah, will you marry me?" Time seemed to stand still. Noah, tears streaming down her face, did not hesitate. "Yes," she replied, her voice choked with emotion, and the room exploded in applause and shouts of joy. People who minutes before had no idea who she was were now celebrating the union of two worlds that, despite their differences, had come together through the power of love and respect. At that moment, it was not just a marriage proposal. It was the consecration of a journey that went beyond titles, status, or social standing. It was a recognition that when you make room for authenticity and hidden genius, life can surprise and transform. Dylan and Noah stood there, hand in hand, center stage, feeling the warmth of the audience, who now saw them as much more than a CEO and a janitor. They were living proof that talent, love, and humility are forces capable of changing the world. And that night, under the spotlights of the gala, Noah was no longer invisible. She was the star, the protagonist of a story that would inspire generations. A story where love and genius walk hand in hand, breaking barriers and building futures. After that unforgettable night, Noah and Dylan's lives were never the same. The young woman who once walked the halls of Hartman Tech with a bucket and a rag now occupied a prominent place, not only on the company's organizational charts, but in the hearts of everyone who knew her. Noah officially became one of the company's technical leaders, taking on strategic projects that required not only her rare intelligence, but also the sensitivity that made her unique. Despite the growing recognition and responsibilities, she maintained the same humility that had charmed Dylan from the very beginning. She continued to smile with simplicity, to treat each colleague with respect, to never forget the origins that shaped her. That essence, so rare in corporate environments, made her career celebrated as an example of overcoming generosity and genuine talent. Dylan, in turn, saw in Noah not only a professional partner, but the love of his life. The marriage proposal was just the beginning of a union that transformed both of them. Together, they built not only a stronger company, but a story that inspired thousands. In their meetings, they talked about innovation, ethics, inclusion, and the importance of recognizing invisible talent, just like Noah's story. What was once a secret slowly became news around the world. News reports, interviews, articles in specialized magazines and technology websites highlighted the extraordinary tale of the young CEO and the brilliant cleaning lady who changed everything. Their story symbolized a powerful message. True talent has no fixed place. It can be found where you least expect it, just waiting for a chance to blossom. Noah and Dylan turned this message into a mission. They created internal programs to discover and value unconventional talent. They encouraged diversity and inclusion, and made sure that no one ever felt invisible in the company. Hartman Tech's culture became an example for the market, a reference that transcended borders. But more than numbers and results, what really mattered to them was the life they were building together. A home where respect, empathy, and love guided every step, where achievements were celebrated together and difficulties faced side by side, where Noah's brilliance no longer needed to be hidden. On the contrary, it was the light that illuminated each day. Their relationship wasn't a perfect fairy tale. There were challenges, doubts, fears, but the solid foundation they built, based on trust and mutual admiration, helped them overcome everything. And this journey, full of imperfections and victories, became even more inspiring. The world followed their story with enthusiasm and hope. In their talks, Dylan and Noah told how chance had brought them together, but how respect and courage made the difference. They showed that sometimes what seems impossible is just an opportunity in disguise. That true success is the kind that transforms lives. And so, in the heart of Toronto, a company was reborn, a young woman shone, and a love blossomed. Together, showing that the greatest revolutions begin when we see beyond appearances. That the power of humility and talent can move mountains, break down barriers, and build futures. The story of Dylan Hartman and Noah Rivers became an inspiration, living proof that love, genius, and humility, when walking side by side, are unbeatable forces. And that, in the end, it is this combination that truly transforms the world. So, did you like this story that proves that talent and love can emerge where we least expect it? If you enjoyed this incredible journey of overcoming and surprise, you already know what to do, right? Give it a thumbs up, press the subscribe button below, and activate the bell. Because here, every day there is a story that will touch your heart and mind. Come be a part of this family that believes in the power of humility, hidden talent, and of course love that transforms everything. So, let's click, like, share, and spread this good vibe around. Because together, we can make the impossible possible. Until the next video, and remember, here we don't just tell stories, we make you fall in love with them. Thanks.